Max Anderson, an explorer, desperately flees from a menacing dinosaur. Suddenly, a crater opens before him, leaving him no choice but to jump across. He slips and plunges into a fiery abyss. However, it's all just a nightmare for Trevor Anderson, a professor and researcher. In reality, he's facing a different challenge. His university won't fund his missing brother Max's studies anymore. As Trevor returns home, his sister-in-law urgently calls, announcing her arrival with his nephew, Sean. Panic sets in as Trevor realizes his house is a chaotic mess, prompting him into a frantic race to tidy up before their guests arrive. Elizabeth, the young man's mother, plans to leave him with Trevor for 10 days while she arranges his move to Canada. However, the young man isn't thrilled about staying with his uncle, especially because he won't part with his video game. Before departing, Elizabeth hands Trevor a box that belonged to Max. Opening the box, Trevor discovers various mementos, including a baseball glove and a yo-yo. Unfortunately, he mishandles the items, accidentally destroying one of his trophies. Among Max's belongings, Trevor finds his brother's favorite book, Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. When he examines the book, he's surprised to find several notes regarding magma temperatures, particularly in the regions where he's conducting his research. At the same time, Trevor heads to his laboratory, and Sean notices an extra dot on the computer screen, located in Iceland. The professor then proposes that Max might have been investigating the location where everyone suspected the existence of volcanic passages to the center of the Earth before his disappearance. Upon returning home, Trevor confesses his intention to follow his brother's trail and bring Sean along. The young man insists on joining because Max was his father. During their journey, Trevor attempts to decipher the notes in the book, which the young man suggests might be a person's name. After a brief search, they discover that the name belongs to the executive director of the Institute of Progressive Volcanology. Upon disembarking from the plane, they embark on a long drive to reach the institute's address. However, when they arrive at the remote and isolated location, they're taken aback by a simple hut that contradicts their expectations of a grand institution. When they knock on the door, they are greeted by a striking young woman named Hannah. She reveals that she is the daughter of the late director of the institute, leaving Trevor and Sean puzzled by this revelation. Hannah goes on to confess that her father was a Vernian, meaning he sympathized with Jules Verne's theories. Max also shared the same beliefs as the famous author. This revelation, Hannah warns them that there is no safe route to the volcano but offers to guide them in exchange for a generous sum of money, as she's an experienced mountain guide. During their trek, Sean confides in his uncle that he's interested in Hannah. To his surprise, Trevor admits that he's also interested in her. According to Hannah, Snuffles Mountain, which they are climbing, is perilous and treacherous. Additionally, Verne's book suggests that this place is where the passage to the center of the Earth is located. The professor stumbles upon the sensor used in their research, but a sudden storm erupts, prompting Sean and Hannah to seek shelter. Meanwhile, Trevor retrieves the device from the ground. Lightning starts striking the area around him, but with determination, he manages to recover the equipment. He then rushes towards the shelter with lightning bolts falling dangerously close, drawn by the sensor. In a bold move, Trevor tosses the device backward, and it gets struck by one of the lightning bolts. He leaps into the cave just as an explosion occurs, causing the entrance to collapse. Inside, the three explorers realize they are trapped because the passage has been blocked by tons of stones. Now, they must find a way out, faced with two paths, one of which could lead them back to the surface. During their journey, the professor fails to notice a cliff in front of him and nearly falls. Hannah acts swiftly, saving him at the edge of the chasm. There's a sign warning them to stay away, but despite this, Trevor decides to investigate further and lights a flare to gauge the depth of the precipice. However, a sudden explosion rattles the cave due to the presence of magnesium in the cave walls, a highly flammable substance. Faced with this new problem, Hannah produces a fireproof flare. By timing how long it takes for the flare to hit the ground, they estimate the chasm's depth to be about 60 meters. Following this revelation, they decide to rappel down to the lower level. This makes Sean nervous and afraid, but Trevor is the first to descend into the eerie place, followed by his nephew, who is supported by Hannah. Along the way, Trevor becomes entranced by a unique type of stone, which distracts him and causes him to lose his grip on the rope, making it come loose. Recognizing the dire situation, Hannah suggests that they cut the cable holding the professor up to prevent all of them from falling at once. Trevor is filled with despair at the thought, but Hannah takes action and cuts the rope, sending him plummeting downward. However, Hannah knew that Trevor was very close to the ground before she let him fall. When they all finally reach firm ground, they discover a perilous old mine where numerous people lost their lives in a long-ago disaster. As they venture deeper, the group stumbles upon the mine's generator. Despite Trevor's warnings of potential danger, Hannah activates the device, causing the lights to illuminate their surroundings. Shortly after, Sean suggests that the mine could be their way out, but Hannah confesses that only one miner ever managed to escape alive. Undeterred, they all climb into one of the mining carts, and Hannah accelerates the vehicle. However, it quickly reaches an uncontrollable speed due to sharp curves and descents. They must also dodge various pieces of debris that obstruct their path. Along the way, they encounter a damaged section of the track, but the trolley clears it with ease. Afterward, the track forks, sending each vehicle in a different direction. As Hannah navigates the tracks, she notices that they abruptly come to an end, a daunting predicament. Quick thinking, she jumps into Trevor's trolley. However, neither of the adults anticipated that Trevor's path would also reach a dead end. In a brilliant improvisation, Hannah ties a rope around them and attaches one end to the rails. This way, they are anchored to the ground while the trolley crashes into a stone wall and explodes. Meanwhile, Sean silently appears in his vehicle. He investigates one of the passages leading to a place filled with precious stones like rubies and diamonds. These crystals typically form in volcanic tubes that can reach the surface. While the young man is engrossed in collecting as many stones as possible, a slight tremor grabs the group's attention. Upon examining the soil, Hannah discovers it's made of muscovite, a delicate rock formation prone to collapsing. Everyone proceeds toward the exit cautiously and at a slow pace. However, Sean's diamond falls out of his bag, causing a hole in the rock. Initially, nothing happens, and they breathe a sigh of relief, but suddenly, the ground gives way, and everything begins to collapse. During their fall, Trevor shares one of Verne's theories, suggesting that this type of volcanic tunnel might slow down falling objects. Suddenly, they encounter a waterfall that acts like a slide, reducing their falling speed and leading them into a cave through an underwater passage. As they emerge from the water, Trevor and Sean realize that Hannah is still submerged. Trevor swiftly searches for her, but she can't swim due to the weight of her bag, requiring Trevor's assistance to get out. After their escape, they take a moment to rest and notice bright spots resembling stars on the cave ceiling. To their astonishment, these lights begin to move, revealing a type of bioluminescent bird. Trevor confesses that these creatures have been extinct for thousands of years. One of the birds approaches Sean, and the rest of the group follows them into a passageway. Here, they discover a vast, hidden world teeming with lakes and mountains. Trevor is overwhelmed with joy because Max's theories have been proven correct. In the sky, they observe a colossal fireball, resembling the sun. Trevor mentions that the book contains a detailed description of this world within another world. During their exploration, they encounter breathtaking waterfalls, remarkable plants, and colossal fossilized mushrooms. All the while, the professor compares his findings with the content of the book, finding an astonishing alignment between the book's descriptions and the reality before them. The entire group goes to investigate and finds what appears to be a kind of treehouse. Trevor decides to venture inside, while Hannah continues her search on the ground. Upon entering the treehouse, Trevor realizes that everything inside seems to belong to the last century, possibly belonging to the book's protagonist. Simultaneously, Hannah stumbles upon some exploration equipment and a bottle bearing the name of the missing explorer. Hannah also discovers a lantern lying near a cliff. While rummaging through the books in the treehouse, the men realize that this place used to be Max's shelter, and in his notes, he mentioned the presence of an underground ocean nearby. Hannah proceeds to show them the location of the missing man, and the three of them prepare a proper burial for Sean's father, whom he never knew. During this impromptu funeral, everyone is deeply moved by the heartfelt messages in Max's diary, which were written for his son. In his notebook, Max explains that the site is surrounded by magma, and during periods of intense seismic activity, it transforms into a giant furnace. After listening to the adults' conversation, Sean expresses a keen interest in discovering what happened to his father. They explained that the place becomes increasingly hotter, reaching temperatures of around 194 degrees. However, a human being can only endure up to 134 degrees. This is why the group intends to follow Max's plan, which involves crossing the ocean until they reach a river with a thermal spring capable of taking them to the surface. They must do this before the heat rises and the water evaporates quickly. Using the instructions in Max's notebook, they set to work building a caravel for their daring journey. As the temperature continues to rise, it reaches a scorching 105 degrees. After putting the finishing touches on their caravel, Trevor hands Sean a compass that once belonged to Max. However, Sean must use it with caution because in the center of the Earth, the polarity is reversed. The explorers then raise the sail, harnessing the wind to gain momentum. At this point, the professor nearly gets left behind but manages to leap into the boat just in time. During their journey, one of the bioluminescent birds appears to warn Sean about something. They soon encounter an approaching storm. Hannah advises them to lower the sail, but they are running out of time as the temperature has already reached a sweltering 109 degrees. Sean then notices some sort of large fish in the sea. Suddenly, one of these creatures leaps out of the water and lunges at Sean, and then at Hannah, who skillfully dodges it. Next, one of the creatures with enormous teeth charges toward Trevor. He holds it firmly and, with a well-aimed kick, hurls it back into the water. Soon after, hundreds of giant piranhas emerge and advance against the group. They use makeshift baseball bats to fend off the attacking animals. During the intense battle with the piranhas, Sean receives a call from his mother, who asks him about his whereabouts. Suddenly, one of the fish gets stuck on top of the boat and is about to bite Hannah. However, Trevor manages to defeat the animal just in time for Sean to say goodbye to Elizabeth. Unfortunately, his phone is eaten by one of the monsters shortly after. The professor signals to Sean that another monster is about to attack him. Sean prepares himself, but this time, the beast that jumps out of the water is enormous and easily devours the piranhas. They realize that the giant creatures are only interested in the fish, making navigation more challenging with hundreds of them in the water. To avoid unwanted confrontations, the group decides to change their route. As they continue their voyage, the wind becomes so strong that it causes Hannah to lose her grip on the sails, and the rope inflicts terrible injuries to her hands. Quickly, Sean rushes forward to grab the ropes. Despite Trevor's warning, Sean is unable to react in time, and the force of the gale breaks the sail's attachment, carrying him away in the storm. When he regains consciousness, Sean finds a terrifying piranha lying next to him. He realizes he's alone on an isolated beach, gazing at an opening in the rocks. There, he encounters his bird friend, who guides him to a source of drinking water. Meanwhile, the two adults are walking on dry land, calling out for Sean. They believe that he'll be resourceful enough to locate the river on his own. During his journey, Sean finally finds water to quench his thirst and expresses his gratitude to the bird before continuing to follow it through the strange world. While resting, Trevor encounters a carnivorous plant with razor-sharp teeth, attempting to bite Hannah. He lands a decisive blow on the creature, closely observing it after knocking it out. However, when he looks back, he realizes that Hannah has disappeared. She's been ensnared by several vines controlled by carnivorous plants that appear in pairs around him. As Trevor attempts to attack the creatures, his spear becomes immobilized, forcing him to rely on punches, which result in a disgusting goo from the monster's mouth sticking to his hand. He must now fight off several of these monsters simultaneously, while Hannah is increasingly suffocated by the vines. Skillfully, Trevor manages to pull the carnivorous plant out by its roots, freeing Hannah from her bonds. However, just as the couple is about to continue on the trail, one of the creatures rises up behind Trevor. He swiftly knocks it out with ease. Meanwhile, Sean proceeds towards a distant light at the end of the cave. As he moves, he stumbles, but when he gets up, he notices that his pocket knife is mysteriously floating, indicating the presence of a magnetic field. Soon after, the young man starts running over the rock formations in front of him. To his surprise, one of the rocks shifts easily, revealing an abyss beneath it. He realizes that the rocks are magnetic and can float on their own. Sean prepares to follow a trail of floating rocks, jumping from one to the next while balancing himself. However, along the way, he suddenly loses his balance and falls onto one of the rocks. Now, he struggles to regain his balance and keep the stones close together. But when he takes a false step, the rocks start moving further and further away from him, leaving him stranded far from the next stop. Faced with this precarious situation, Sean musters the courage to make a daring leap that propels him forward. However, the leap is too forceful and causes the rock to spin around, putting him on the verge of falling into the abyss. Sean desperately clings on, trying to maintain his balance, even as he faces the terrifying chasm. Simultaneously, one of his belongings falls out of his pocket, adding to his anxiety. He breathes a sigh of relief when he returns to the top of the rock, but it soon starts to move dangerously once more. Sean clings on for dear life until it stabilizes back on the surface. Meanwhile, Trevor and Hannah spot the river that leads to the path of the hot spring. However, they refuse to leave without finding Sean, so they call out for him, receiving no response. On the other hand, Sean continues to follow his compass, but the temperature keeps rising, causing him to sweat profusely from the oppressive heat. During his journey, Sean makes a startling discovery: he's walking on giant animal skulls. Suddenly, he hears a terrifying noise and quickly hides. Trevor decides to part ways with Hannah, asking her to continue on the trail while he intends to go back and search for his nephew. They share a heartfelt goodbye kiss, fearing they may never see each other again. At the same time, Sean is startled by a disgusting liquid falling to the ground in front of him. When he looks up, he is confronted by a salivating dinosaur, ready to devour him. In an adrenaline-fueled moment, the monster attempts to grab Sean, but he skillfully dodges it by rolling on the ground. He then runs wildly, with the relentless predator hot on his heels. During the escape, the dinosaur rampages through everything in its path, inching closer and closer to Sean. Eventually, the young man finds refuge in a cave, but the creature smashes through the cave wall with its sharp teeth. Meanwhile, Trevor hears his nephew's desperate cries, realizing that the sound is coming from the other side of the wall he's on. He desperately tries to break through it. Just as Sean is about to be devoured by the dinosaur, the professor manages to destroy the wall and save the young man. Before they can catch their breath, the creature scrambles across the rocks with ease, causing them to run wildly. Determined to perform one last act of courage, Trevor leads the dinosaur toward an area with incredibly fragile rocks, risking falling in with the predator. Faced with this situation, the professor eventually makes a run for it while the ground continues to give way, causing the monster to plummet down a precipice that suddenly appears. In search of his uncle, Sean reaches the edge of the chasm and finds Trevor holding on tightly to the rocks. Soon after, they navigate through a tunnel that leads to the river. However, they discover that the water is boiling due to the rising temperature of the place. Fortunately, Hannah appears, rowing a boat made from the skull of a dinosaur. A little later, they notice that the boat's speed is gradually increasing, and the water is running out, indicating that the group is on the riverbed. As they continue their journey, the explorers come across an immense crater into which they fall and become trapped, surrounded by boiling magma below. Realizing that for the hot spring to work, the water needs to combine with the lava, they are stuck because the water hasn't passed through the area for a few hours. While carefully examining the site, Trevor notices traces of water running down the wall, but the rocks block his path. Faced with this dilemma, the professor has an ingenious idea, using the flares to react with the magnesium present in the environment. This reaction will cause controlled explosions capable of creating cracks in the rocks and releasing the trapped liquid. To put his plan into practice, Trevor uses 2 flares, but neither of them explodes as expected. With the last flare in hand, Trevor makes a bold decision to descend into the abyss to the driest part of the wall. Hannah handles the rope to which the professor is tied. He searches for a rock with more magnesium, but there is still a significant amount of moisture. In a desperate move, he decides to throw the flare from the drier side of the tunnel. As he hurls the object, it hits the target, but initially, nothing happens. However, a small spark ignites, triggering a chain reaction of explosions. The rocks give way in response to the detonation, releasing water. This water makes contact with the boiling magma below, resulting in the formation of a colossal thermal eruption. The force of the jet propels the boat upwards, and as it breaches the surface, it continues to rise. Eventually, it plummets downward at an astonishing speed, and the impact is softened by a plantation, destroying all the fruit in its path. At the end of their incredible journey, the boat comes to a stop when it collides with the home of an Italian man. He's understandably furious about the destruction of his vegetable garden. In an attempt to make amends, Sean takes one of the diamonds from his bag and offers it to the man, who, in return, asks if they want to slip through the plantation again. Back at work, Trevor is confronted by Alan, who notices the happiness on his face. Trevor responds by claiming that he was exceptionally lucky over the weekend, falling into a real fortune. Hannah and the professor bid farewell to Sean, inviting him to spend the Christmas vacations with them. Before leaving, Sean receives a book from his uncle about the lost city of Atlantis. As he prepares to depart, Sean feeds his pet that's inside the bag. It's at this moment that they all come across the bioluminescent bird that was in the center of the earth, bringing their extraordinary adventure to a magical close.